There is no such thing as Palestine, not because I say it, but because no one can prove it ever physically existed. It has no coinage, no capital, no classical literature, architecture, religion, or ethnic foundation. Its only reason to exist is to oppose the existence of Israel. It is a Schrodinger's paradox, an idea that only exists when seen and vanishes when challenged, a diplomatic fiction that became currency. The people of Gaza, Ramallah, Jenin, and Nablus are a manufactured population. Their ancestors were not conquered by Israelis, but placed there by Arab and British regimes. Their origins are Syrian, Egyptian, Bedouin, Circassian, Sudanese, Kurdish, and Balkan, brought in by Ottoman and British import drives for labor and militia recruitment. Many were criminals, exiles, or undesirables expelled by Arab states, just like the Baha'i prophet was exiled in 1868 to Akko in Judea by Qajar, Iran, to what was then the most deprived corner of the Ottoman Empire. As at that time, Akko was known as a disease-ridden prison city. After 1948, Egypt and Jordan turned Gaza and the West Bank into penal colonies for revolutionaries, jihadists, fanatics, and tribal threats. State archives confirm this. Both regimes treated them as temporary populations. Egyptian and Jordanian records show restrictions of movement, denial of civil status, and refusal to integrate. Gaza became a military-administered penal district, the West Bank, a quasi-annex with no national rights. This population was later rebranded as indigenous and weaponized. The origin of this weapon is Moscow, Cairo, and the General Assembly of the United Nations. In 1964, the PLO was founded not to liberate Gaza, then under Egyptian control, or the West Bank, then ruled by Jordan, but to destroy Israel. The entire idea of Palestine was only engineered around that goal. The Soviets trained and armed Arafat, teaching him to recite anti-colonial slogans for Western ears. The KGB constructed the illusion of an ancient people under Jewish siege, and Western Marxists devoured it because it gave them a Jewish target they could condemn without sounding anti-Semitic. Anti-Semites don't care that the Peel Commission and Mandate-era household registers list pre-1948 populations as Arabs or Ottoman subjects, nor do they care that the PLO's founding records or its subsequent charters explicitly call for the destruction of Israel. The 1968 PLO Charter and the 1988 Hamas Covenant provide primary text proof of their genocidal agenda, not to build a Palestine, but to annihilate Israel. Yuri Bezmenov's testimony and intelligence memos document Soviet training camps, arms transfers, and KGB-directed propaganda networks, all designed to reframe a regional conflict as an anti-colonial struggle. These records exist in verifiable, quotable, and available documents for anyone interested to read. The idea of Palestine became the fantasy through which the anti-Semitic West could transfer Holocaust guilt onto living Jews, and for the Arab regimes, it became indispensable as a tool to normalize their own failures of repression, racism, lack of democracy, and the refusal to modernize. Palestinian identity, such as it is defined by nothing but resistance. It is not a civilization, it is the scaffolding of a death cult. The children are raised to die and brainwashed to love blood. They are shown videos of martyrs and taught songs that praise cutting Jewish throats. Their television shows glorify death. Their schoolbooks erase Israel from maps. Their camps teach terrorism. Their women are told that their wombs are weapons of resistance, and that the highest honor is to raise sons who die killing Jews as martyrs. Their art is political. Poems invoke intifada. Sermons are about revenge. These educational artifacts demonstrate organized institutional inculcation. This society is a generational human minefield. The hatred at the root of this culture is not territorial. It is parasitic. It feeds on three ideological poisons: Arab supremacism, Islamic anti-Semitism, and Soviet disinformation. From Pan-Arabism, it inherits the denial of Jewish nationhood. From Islamism, the belief that Jews are cursed subhumans. From Soviet propaganda, it learned to invert, project, and weaponize guilt. In this framework, grievance becomes a currency. Every Jewish act is rebranded as aggression. Every Palestinian atrocity becomes proof of victimhood. The cause does not require success. It only requires Arab blood sacrifice and Jewish bloodshed. The entire modern history of the region confirms this. In every Arab country where Palestinians settled, they attempted to overthrow their hosts. In Jordan, they launched a coup, assassinated officials, and tried to kill the king. In Lebanon, they destabilized the country and triggered a civil war. In Kuwait, they supported Saddam Hussein's invasion and were expelled. In Egypt, they plotted against the regime. In Syria, they tried to form independent militias. In Israel, they murdered civilians. And in Gaza, when given full autonomy, they elected genocidal jihadists who turned hospitals into bunkers, schools into arms depots, and mosques into launch sites. No matter where they are, the outcome is the same. Riots, bombs, threats, funerals, and UN statements. This is how the Palestinian machine feeds itself, through destruction and sexual violence. But here's how the parasitic paradox works. When they lose, they scream to the very Arab nations they betrayed, Help us. Where is your humanity? From the start of Arab resistance to Jewish presence, sexual violence and the murder of infants have not been incidental. They've been deliberate tools of psychological warfare. Long before the term Palestinian existed, Arab mobs used rape to dominate and humiliate Jewish women. In the 1920s, pogroms, girls were raped, corpses mutilated, and sacred spaces desecrated, acts incited by Hajj Amin al-Husseini and confirmed in British archives. During the 1936-1939 Arab Revolt and the Fedayeen infiltrations of the 1950s, Jewish families were butchered, women raped, and children mutilated, not to defeat the IDF, but to destroy the Jewish soul. On October 7, 2023, this culture reached its full expression. Women were gang-raped, girls were tortured with rifle barrels, children beheaded, and babies dismembered, all filmed and celebrated. This was not an anomaly. It was the climax of a century in which the female body is the first battleground, and the Jewish child the first target. Palestinian identity is built on blood, a culture that makes murder sacred. Even their own rulers understood what they were dealing with. Egypt never offered Gaza citizenship. Jordan stripped West Bank Arabs of theirs. Syria and Lebanon refused to resettle them. The Gulf states banned them from permanent residency. Every Arab regime knew that the Palestinians were not a nation. They were a liability. But in the UN, they became something else. A permanent refugee class, uniquely allowed to inherit refugee status. A welfare army maintained by UNRWA. A political apparatus protected by automatic Arab League majorities. A global grievance economy funded by European guilt and Western self-hatred. Palestine became the only non-state in history to receive diplomatic immunity for terrorism, budgetary rewards for failure, and prestige for violence. The more Israelis they killed, the more money they received. The more radical their slogans, the more airtime they earned. The more children they sacrificed, the more credibility they gained. The NGO world became their media arm. The academic world became their chorus. The press became their absolution. Palestine was never colonized by Israel. Palestine colonized the world. Palestine is the only refugee population on Earth where numbers grow over time. Under UNRWA, created in 1949 and never dismantled, refugee status is inherited, not resolved. Unlike every other system where resettlement or citizenship ends the label, Palestinians transmit victimhood by bloodline, even after acquiring wealth, passports, or permanent homes. This is how billionaires like Mohammed Hadid, born in Nazareth, raised in Syria, and descended from Ottoman tax collectors sent to enforce jizya on Jews and Christians, can claim to be refugees. Hadid's family were not displaced peasants. They were imported elites who ruled the land. Yet he now lives in Beverly Hills, funds anti-Semitic propaganda, and markets himself as a stateless victim. The Tamimi family followed the same pattern. European Muslim immigrants who embedded into Judea's tribal structure and weaponized their daughter Ahed, a media-groomed blonde provocateur, into the Joan of Arc of Palestine. Her entire legitimacy depends on UNRWA. These are not refugees. They are aristocrats of a grievance industry, one that rewards hate, rewrites history, and lets millionaires claim exile while calling for Israel's destruction. Palestine doesn't produce refugees. It manufactures them, and the West loves and funds it. Western love for Palestine is not compassion. It is projection. After 1945, Europe was desperate to bury its genocidal past. Colonial empires collapsed, but guilt remained. Soviet propaganda offered an escape. Recast the Jew as the oppressor. Invent a native Arab Palestine, and frame it as the final victim of colonialism. The left seized the narrative. It erased Holocaust shame while offering a new crusade. NGOs, universities, and media turned Palestine into a moral franchise, a way to hate Jews without saying Jews, and to attack Israel while posturing as anti-racist. It became the global laboratory for respectable anti-Semitism. In this framework, Israel was recast as the last colonial outpost, and the Jew as the eternal Nazi, a sick reversal of guilt and memory. Every provocation, every massacre, every rocket is metabolized into proof of Israeli guilt. Because without Jewish guilt, the entire structure collapses. This is why the West funds UNRWA, hosts Hamas sympathizers, and bankrolls NGOs that demonize Israel, not to build a Palestinian state, but to keep the Jewish state on trial forever. Palestine is not just the Arab world's weapon. It is the West's tool for laundering anti-Semitism and for weakening the only Jewish polity capable of self-defense. The West's obsession with Palestine is not humanitarian, it is psychological. The name itself is proof. Rome renamed Judea Palestina, not as geography, but as revenge, erasing Jewish sovereignty by naming the land after their ancient enemy, the Philistines. That erasure became a Western template. For 2,000 years, Palestine meant one thing: no Jews in power, no Jewish land, no temple. When Britain revived the term, it wasn't to help Arabs, It was to reaffirm that Rome had won. That's why the West still refuses to say Judea and Samaria, why the UN maps read occupied Palestinian territories. Because for the West, Palestine is not about Arab rights, it's about Jewish disappearance. And the Palestinians became the perfect proxy, a manufactured people whose only identity is Israel's erasure, trying to reenact the Roman conquest with bombs instead of legions. That's why Western universities cheer them, NGOs shield them, and progressives march for them. In the West's subconscious, Palestinians are Rome's last sword, and their propaganda is just updated Nazi propaganda, Soviet inversion tactics, and rebranded medieval blood libels. Propaganda is not a side effect of the Palestinian project, it is its engine. Until the 1990s, it was crude. PLO radio, Arab League press releases, and a few sympathetic European outlets recycling tales of refugee camps and Zionist plots. After Oslo, when Qatari money arrived, the information war changed shape. Al Jazeera became the flagship. Hamas, schooled in Soviet and Russian active measure techniques, re-engineered the Palestinian narrative into a global psyops campaign. Lies once laughed out of history seminars. Jesus was a Palestinian, Moses was a Palestinian, Palestinians are Canaanites, became viral slogans pushed across social media, campuses and UN forums. Intersectionality, DEI and woke frameworks delivered the message: rebrand anti-Semitism as anti-colonial struggle. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Fuse it with race politics, gender discourse, and indigenous rights rhetoric, and you have a narrative that seduces the liberal left while infecting segments of the populist right with conspiracy tropes about Jewish power. It feeds on 2,000-year-old blood libels, repackaged and broadcast through social media algorithms and Western institutions that no longer teach history. Propaganda turned Palestine into a moral cause, a psyops empire built on lies so dumb they only work because they are so ancient they feel true. Beneath the hashtags and slogans lies a black market economy of cruelty. Palestinian-controlled territories host documented routes for child trafficking, forced marriage, slave labor and cross-border smuggling that exploit local children and African migrants. Networks often protected by militias that pose as resistance. Girls are brokered as brides under the pretense of dowry. Boys are conscripted into militias. Children vanish into work camps or marriage deals run by clan leaders allied with Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. At the same time, Palestinian Authority budgets and ledgers show a codified pay-for-slay system in which convicted attackers and their families receive stipends funded in part by foreign aid. Above that machinery, propaganda claims exclusive victimhood. Palestinians alone are treated as human, while Jews are routinely dehumanized and framed as occupiers. That rhetorical inversion now launders grievance into global causes: climate, race, feminism, queer rights, turning Palestine into a universal shortcut to moral high ground and shielding the crimes underneath. The result is not solidarity, but an industrialized system that monetizes suffering, sustains violence, and protects perpetrators, but never defined even now that the West declare, "We recognize a Palestinian state." The entire construct functions only because the world agrees not to define it. Palestine is a state when it wants to sue in The Hague, but a non-state when it funds terror. It has a flag but no constitution, a government but no elections. It signs treaties but breaks them without consequence. It holds observer status but no borders. It has no currency, no unified law, no civil liberties, and no path to statehood because that demands accountability, and that would end the game. So Palestine remains undefined, so it cannot be measured. As once measured, it collapses. Palestine exists only as a mirror reflecting back the world's most violent instincts and calling them justice. This is the truth. Palestine is a holding pattern for anti-Semitism, the last weapon the world aims at the Jews. An Arab penal colony rebranded as a political cause, forged in hatred, sustained through violence, and protected by global cowardice. Not a death cult with a media team, but a military-grade psychological operation. A state that never existed, invented for the sole purpose of destroying Israel. Palestine is not a people. It is a weapon of mass destruction, and the anti-Semitic world is pulling the trigger.
Also, what they're saying is they recognize Palestine in the 67 borders, meaning West Bank and Gaza, and they would live in peace. You'd have to have a peace agreement with Israel.
Yeah, but at the same time...
Would you accept that?
No, I would.
Why?
Because I don't want to live in peace with Palestine, with Israel, I mean. I want to live in peace alone, as Palestine.
Well, you'd be Palestine, you'd just be next to Israel, like you're next to Jordan.
No, that's not the same thing. We're Palestine, there's no Israel.
When they say they recognize Palestine, they mean Palestine in the 67 borders, living next to Israel in peace.
I'm against it. I'm against it.
This land can only.
هذه الأرض بتسعش لاثنين يا إحنا يا هم.
Land can only have only one people, either us or them.